that way is obstruction of justice is a specific intent crime, which means the government has to show the prosecutors that the person trying to obstruct was doing it with corrupt intent. So knowing there was an investigation, endeavoring to try and disrupt it, and that would turn on a whole lot that I couldn't see and can't see from here. I'm the witness, potentially in that matter, not the prosecutor or the investigator. That's why I answer it that way.
But essentially what he's saying is that your memos exonerate him. Is that true?
That's not a judgment for me to make. Really, it's for the special...
Well, I mean, do you believe they exonerate him?
I believe they recount accurately my encounters with President Trump. Now, what that means and the significance of it in light of other evidence is for the special prosecutor to figure out.
But you believe the interactions were so significant that you needed to write them down immediately?
Yes.
And obviously, if you believe that, that's not something you were doing after every meeting with President Obama.
No, I had never done it with President Trump.
Bush.
I had never done it with President Obama. I'd never written a memo after meeting with President Bush.
The next question is from T.T. Nguyen. She's a freshman studying government and has a question about the special counsel.
Hi, Director Comey. My question is, what do you think about McConnell's decision not to bring the legislation introduced to protect Mueller from being fired for investigating the Russian interference in the election to the Senate floor?
I don't have an informed view, honestly, because I don't know enough about the constitutional and especially constitutional concerns about legislation like that, so I don't know. Whether there's legislation or not, I would hope that everyone, no matter where they are on our political spectrum, would want to make sure that Director Mueller, former Director Mueller, can complete his work and get to truth. I don't know what the truth will be, but I'm confident that if he's left to do his job, he will find the truth. And that's what we all should want.
I want to ask you about your former boss, Rudy Giuliani, who you write about. You were a prosecutor on his team in New York. He's now obviously joined the president's legal team. He told CNN that he's there to help negotiate an end to the investigation. And he talked about his prior relationship with Mueller as being part of that. Is that how it works? I mean, can you, based on a prior relationship, negotiate an end to a federal investigation?
No. No, not with any federal prosecutor, and sure as heck not with Robert Mueller.
It doesn't work that way.
It does not work that way. It's about the facts and the law. He does not care about personalities. Again, I know him professionally very well. His mission is to find the truth. And unlike most partisans start with a conclusion and look through it to find facts. That's not the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to turn that around and look at the facts, find them all, and then once you have them all, see what conclusion that reasonably supports. I'm confident that's the way the prosecutors and the agents working for Bob Mueller think about it.
I think I know the answer to this, but Giuliani spoke today to the Wall Street Journal, and he posed this question saying, does the special prosecutor really have an open mind? We're trying to assess their good faith. You obviously know Bob Mueller quite well. Does he have an open mind?
Yes, I have high confidence he has an open mind.
The next question is from David Grice. He's a junior studying data science. David?
Yep. Former Director Comey, with your expertise being in the FBI and with a given climate between the United States and Russia, do you believe that we are currently in or maybe on the brink of a second Cold War?
That's a great question, and I don't know whether I'd characterize it that way. We are certainly in, on many levels, conflict with Russia. What they did during the 2016 election was an attack by an adversary nation. And if we are not vigilant, it will happen again in 2018. It will sure happen again in 2020. Now, whether you'd call that a Cold War or a hot war in cyberspace, I don't know. But we are in conflict on many levels with the Russian government.
I want to just quickly ask you, you talked about the memos. I'm sorry to go back to this. And you talked about this team of attorneys you had hired. Fitzgerald was one of them at the time.
Correct.
Right? Did you consult your attorneys, including Fitzgerald, at the time about whether it was legal, appropriate to give a memo to your friend Richmond, who then, and tell him to tell the New York Times what was in it?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about anything I talked about with my legal team.
You're lawyering up?
I guess in a way I am, yeah. And I should have said this to you before, Anderson, because the facts matter here. I'm going to be on another network tomorrow that thinks I should be in jail. The memos that I gave to my legal team after the unclassified memo to Dan Richmond went nowhere besides my legal team. It was for the purpose of advising me and never went beyond the legal team.
I want to go to Aria Austin. She's a freshman studying government and English. Aria?
Good evening. Student-led marches and walkouts have occurred all over the country, including here in Williamsburg, in response to the 20 school shootings that have taken place only 16 weeks into 2018. The issue of gun control is a major topic of discussion in America right now, and young people are taking control of that narrative. Do you think that the March for Our Lives movement and several others will effectively lead to stricter gun control laws, and if so, why now?
I don't know where it will lead. I'm optimistic that it will lead to sensible change around guns, but it actually inspires me in a broader way. I write at the end of my book that I think of Donald Trump's presidency as a forest fire that will do a lot of damage to those values that are above our policy differences. But forest fires, the reason I chose that metaphor is they do damage, but things grow in the wake of them that didn't have the space or the air or the water to grow before. I see that in the Parkland kids. I see that in the William Mary kids. I see that in my own kids standing up and speaking. And I hope they will inspire all of us and maybe shame the adults in this nation to get involved and not become numb to things that are critical to the values of this country. And so I don't know exactly where it'll lead. I think there's plenty of room to do sensible things, respecting the Second Amendment, which I do very, very much, in order to make all of us safer.
I want to ask you about something that happened to you as a kid, which I had never heard before. You write about it in detail in the book. And it seemed to, I think, have an impact on you in terms of getting into law enforcement, or certainly the way you grew up and lived your life. And I'm talking about the Ramsey rapist. And if you could just tell these students what happened when you were, how old?
High school senior.
High school senior.
Yeah. One October night, I was home. Shows you what a geek I was. I was writing on a Friday night a literary magazine piece at 8 o'clock at night. And a serial rapist and robber kicked in the front door to my parents' home, likely looking for my sister, who thank God wasn't home, and ended up taking my brother and me captive, and at one point lying us down on my parents' bed and just pointing the gun at the back of our heads. And I thought he was going to execute us. And that was an amazing moment and changed me in a lot of ways. And then we ended up talking to him. I ended up talking to him and convincing him to lock us in a bathroom. And I told him, we'll stay there the whole night. And then after the search of the house was over, he locked us in the bathroom. And then he went out, and we escaped out the bathroom window, and he caught us again.
He was still there?
Yeah, he had come around to the outside of the bathroom window to check on it, to look in. And I was just having the adrenaline wear off. I was actually sitting on the floor in the bathroom, and I looked up to the window, and there was his face in the bathroom window, and it took my breath away. And I said to my brother, Peter, my younger brother, we're staying here all night. We're staying here all night. And a few seconds later, he said, you know who that is. We got to go get help. And so my younger brother opened the window, and there was plastic on it, tore it out, and went out. And I followed him out barefoot out into the yard. And the gunman had gone next door and came back and captured us, and he was livid at me and started saying that he was going to kill me again. And I thought again I was going to get executed. And then a chaotic scene ensued where a neighbor intervened and a neighbor's dog, and we escaped again and locked ourselves in the house and got butcher knives. And ultimately he fled into the woods as the police arrived, and we survived that night. Wasn't hurt. But I thought about the Ramsey rapist every night before I went to bed for 5 years. I don't mean most nights, I mean every night. And I slept with a weapon, a knife or a bat or something next to me for many, many years. And what it created for me, Anderson, as a prosecutor investigator, was a tremendous sense of empathy. I wasn't hurt. Think about the people beaten, raped, assaulted, shot. What have they experienced and what are their lives like? And so it changed me in a lot of ways. I write in the book, I still thought I wanted to be a doctor. I came to William Mary to major in chemistry, but I couldn't see it. I can see it now through the lens of adulthood, that in a way that put me on the path that I'm on to this point. And it was, one of the most important things that ever happened to me. And it's in the book. The book's not a memoir. There's lots of important stuff to me personally that's not in there, but that's in there because it affected how I think as a leader. That I think it's really important to ask questions from the perspective at the end of life, looking back about who you want to be and what you want to do and how you find meaning, And I think an ethical leader's job is to help people find meaning in their work. And given that was a formative experience for me, it loomed so large it had to be in the book.
Did they ever catch this person?
No. A guy was arrested. The attacks, which had happened for almost a year on a regular basis, stopped that night. And they arrested someone and never made the case against him. But it stopped that night. And there was a girl in my high school who had been tied to a tree and sexually assaulted. And we never spoke. I would pass her in the hallway. I'd seen her at the lineup. And we just sort of nodded at each other and communicated with our eyes for the rest of that last year of my high school. But others were spared that pain, maybe because that was the guy and he quit, or maybe because whoever was the serial attacker decided that that was the time to stop it. I don't know, but it ended that night.
We'll be right back with more from CNN's Town Hall with former FBI Director James Comey. CNN's Town Hall with former FBI Director James Comey. You were actually talking to the students during the break, and somebody asked you what your favorite class was here. What was your favorite class here when you were a student?
It was called Death. And it was
that was actually a class.
It was a class. I was a chemistry major, and I'm walking through what was then called Rogers Hall, and it also housed the religion department. And I'm walking on my way to a chem lab, and I see the word death on the bulletin board. So I stop, as I hope you would, and I look at it, and it's a course about religious perspectives, philosophical perspectives on death. And so I took it, I had a hole in my schedule, and it was taught by this remarkable German-American ethicist named Hans Tiefel, who introduced me to Reinhold Niebuhr, and then I took another one. Next thing I knew, I had enough credits for a religion major and wrote my thesis in the religion department and not chemistry. So it was all about death on the bulletin board.
This is Jack Craver. He's a freshman studying government and philosophy. Jack?
Director Comey, regardless of controversy surrounding the president, it was no accident that he was elected. The distinct changes in political norms surrounding the Oval Office were not unexpected, though outrage persists. What does it signal to you that this is what the American people voted for? If this is what they wanted, does that legitimize his unconventional leadership style, regardless of how outside the norms it is?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. Thank you. Yes, in one way, absolutely not in another. To my mind, the concern is not unconventional leadership, communicating through Twitter, breaking norms around state dinners and all that kind of stuff. To me, what matters most and what the American people did not vote for and would not vote for is a derogation of the norms, the touchstone of truth, which is the heart of this country, the rule of law, the equal protection of the laws, freedom of expression, freedom of religion. And one of the things I hope to do is get folks not to focus on the policy fights. Again, as I said earlier, I don't care what people's policy views are, but instead to first talk about those values. Because a whole lot of people who supported Donald Trump come from families with inspiring military service histories. And so the question I have is, so what did those folks fight and die for? Did they fight and die for a tax cut or an immigration approach or something? No, they fought and died for the core values that are all we are as a country, the ones I laid out. I hope we first ask, maybe we wanted an unconventional guy, what is happening to these? Because if we lose these, that's all we are as a country, a collection of aspirations, a collection of values. We should realize those unite us, insist that our leaders reflect those, and then get back to fighting with each other like crazy about the policy issues. But this matters so much that I hope to contribute to a conversation, even among those who supported President Trump and still do, to say we have to make sure these aren't lost.
We have Colin Cochran. He's a freshman studying international relations. Colin?
Thank you, Director Comey. In promoting your recent book, you've talked a lot about ethical leadership. Could you explain your claim to the moral high ground, given your endorsement during your tenure as Deputy Attorney General of 2 memos that approved of the Bush administration's torture techniques, including waterboarding and sleep deprivation? And do you think torture is morally acceptable?
Yeah, great question. First, I hope you don't hear me, and if you do, make sure you hammer me to be claiming I'm on the moral high ground. I'm a flawed person. What I try to do and aspire to do, and especially have learned from others, is figure out how to make decisions as a leader with ethical considerations in mind, with those external reference points. I hope you read the book, because one of the things I talk about in the book is the struggle over torture. Torture is not morally acceptable under any circumstances. The challenge we faced as a Justice Department was Congress chose to define torture different than you or I would understand it. And so the question that was asked of the Justice Department is, so what is the law? And what is permissible under the law? And if you read the book, which I really hope you'll do, you'll see us struggling mightily to figure out what's appropriate, what's lawful, what can be done under the law. And then you'll see me, something I regret actually not pushing hard enough on, stepping out of my lawyer role and begging the Bush administration to consider the policy, the moral considerations around torture, even if it's legal, and even if the intelligence community claims it's effective, which I don't buy, that doesn't mean it's right.
Is waterboarding torture?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so, anyhow, I hope you'll see that struggle in the book that illustrates all of us are flawed people, but how, given our flawed nature, do we make sound decisions? I hope that's what people find the book to be about.
This is Robert Coulter. He's a law student here. Robert?
Hi. So I'm a Californian, a Mexican, and a Republican. And my friends often urge me to switch parties. And sometimes I've been tempted, but I won't, because to me, it's still the party of Lincoln, of Ike, of George H.W. Bush, his son, and my family. That being said, I think the way Trump, his demeanor has been offensive to Republican norms and civil discourse. What first attracted you to the Republican Party, and what do you think is a positive message we could rally around today?
Yeah, I'll take the second part first. I don't know, which is why I'm not a Republican. I've been embarrassed and ashamed by the way the Republican Party has abandoned one of the two things that led me to consider myself a Republican in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was president. I was attracted by the notion that character matters and values matter most of all. That's where you start in evaluating a person, an entity, a country. What are their values? That's non-negotiable. And second, strong national defense, which I'm still passionate about. And so my question for the Republicans is, so where is that? Where is that commitment to character and values? And if people have convinced themselves, well, we'll trade it temporarily for a tax cut or a Supreme Court justice, as I say in the book, that's a fool's bargain, because those values are all that you have. There'll always be another Supreme Court justice, always another tax bill. You lose this, exactly what are you? And so what I hope they'll do is ask themselves, Republicans, so what will I tell my grandchildren? When they ask me, so what did you do? Did you trade a tax cut for the rule of law? For equal protection of the laws? For the truth? Really, Grandpa? And so I hope they'll ask themselves that question and realize that they have to look above those policy issues and think about what matters most in this country.
You're talking about Republicans on Capitol Hill. I mean, you write about that. You're talking about Paul Ryan. You're talking about...
I'm talking about Republicans on Capitol Hill. Talking about Republicans. People who identify themselves as Republicans have to ask that grandchild question of themselves.
And you think they're failing that question?
Yes.
This is Ian Doty, a freshman who's studying international relations. Ian?
Mr. Comey, the conflict between you and President Trump had begun to characterize divisions within our country. An open reconciliation between the two of you could not only allow our country to recover and unite, but would also demonstrate leadership. Have you begun to forgive the president? Do you think you could ever do so?
I actually don't think of it in personal terms. I said this on CNN not long ago. I don't hate the president. I very much dislike the way he approaches issues, especially the truth and values issues. And so to me, there isn't a personal, we don't really know each other personally, a personal schism between us. There's a very different approach to what matters in this country. And so I don't see it as a need for personal reconciliation. I do see it, though, as a need for him. And it would be a wonderful thing if he were able to change and say, you know what, I have to start telling the truth. And when I'm asked questions where I haven't given an answer that's truthful, hold myself accountable to trying to answer that question in a better way. And I'll say one other thing, and stop attacking the institutions that form the pillar of the rule of law in this country.
This is Elizabeth Petaroff. She's a pre-med freshman. Elizabeth?
Hello. I turned 18 just before this past presidential election, and though it was exciting to be able to vote for the first time, I've become very disillusioned with what is going on in Washington, not knowing who or what to believe. What can you say to young adults who are getting their first true taste of American politics during this tumultuous time? How do we begin to comprehend thinking of the future when the present is so unsteady?
Don't withdraw. We need your voices, we need your minds, we need your hearts, we need your passion. You are what is going to grow in the wake of this forest fire. Again, whether you're Republican or Democrat, become involved, not just vote, but participate in the conversation to make sure the values of this country are preserved and protected. And I could imagine, especially given how busy you all are and all you got going on, there's a temptation to say, it's so icky, I'll pull back. Please don't do that. The one small thing I hope to accomplish with this book, and I've written it, I hope so you all can enjoy it, is to encourage you to participate in that conversation because we so desperately need you.
Do you worry, though, that your book has just added to the divisions in this country? I mean, that people are choosing sides on you, they're choosing sides, that it just adds to this sort of flood of vitriol?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if you read the book, the whole book, I think you'll come away with a view that of what I'm trying to accomplish, and that it's not about trying to hate across divisions. It's about trying to drive a conversation about something that actually connects all of us and unites all of us. You think about William and Mary's history. There are 3 buildings here named for 3 people closely associated with this great institution: Washington, Jefferson, and Madison. I lived in one of the 3. And those people fought like cats and dogs about policy issues. Right? Madison and Jefferson didn't like the way that Hamilton was controlling Washington, but they had something in common, something above that they lived their entire lives around, a set of values. We have to remember that and be inspired by that, and have 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 23-year-olds give that life today.
Before we get to the next question, just one other question I'd forgotten to ask on the memos. You said you gave the memos to your 3 people on your legal team. Are those the only people you gave memos to?
Yes, correct.
Nobody else?
Nobody else. Just the 3 lawyers, only for the purpose of advising me, and they gave them to nobody else. Shared the content with nobody else.
Michael Murphy is the Director of IT Support here at William & Mary. Michael?
Hi, Director Comey. I assume the point of your new book was to share your side of what happened as your time as the FBI Director. How is an average American supposed to be able to sort through the information in your book against the conflicting information coming out of the White House and know what is fact and what is not?
Yeah, great question. First, I hope people will read it. And I hope what they'll discover in there is someone who is trying to be transparent about things I've done wrong, things I've done right, criticisms that could be leveled at me. And it's about far more than my time as FBI Director. It goes back to being bullied as a kid and bullying somebody else here at William & Mary. It's designed to try and offer some framework for how leadership should be and must be. And so in terms of how to figure out what's true, draw on as many sources as possible and evaluate track record, consistency, take everything with a grain of salt. That's what you learn at William & Mary. Love everyone, trust no one, right? Understand biases, cross-examine yourself, find other pieces of information, crash it all together in order to make your best judgment. But always make that judgment knowing I could be wrong. I've worked as hard as I can to get this right. I could be wrong. That's my best advice to you.
What do you think you've been wrong about in your leadership, if there's one thing that you regret the most?
Well, how much time do you have? A lot of different things. I made a bunch of poor personnel decisions as FBI Director. I did some things like I carelessly created a rift with Poland by speaking about them in a speech that wasn't about Poland. I did a bunch of other knucklehead things. No huge thing, but I could probably tick off about 30 sitting here of those kinds of things.
I want you to meet Danny Banks, who's an IT analyst here at the college. He's got a question about your future.
Good evening, Director Comey. Schadenfreude, a German word that means enjoyment gained from the troubles of others. There have been many Schadenfreude moments in our country over the last couple of years. For example, your abrupt firing, resignations and election losses in both parties, and the president's manifold troubles, to name a few. While many people obtain joy from these moments, they actually do more to divide this country. You are experienced, talented, and still relatively young. So, will you run for political office and try to effect change in Washington? Thank you.
I will not. Thank you for that. I won't. I never will. That's not who I am. But you don't have to run for office to be part of effecting change in this country. I hope part of teaching at William & Mary about leadership and ethics is I can both teach and learn from an amazing group of young people, and then I'm going to travel around and lecture at universities and other places trying to facilitate this conversation. And so I think there's lots of ways for me to be useful without running for office.
I got to ask, on the Today Show, I saw that you repeated over and over that you wouldn't run for president. You said you wanted your wife to hear you. Does that mean that your wife wants you to run for president?
No. She keeps talking about my second wife might be okay with that. No, we've actually had this debate about whether I would ever feel compelled She knows I don't ever want to do it, but because I felt I could make a difference no other way, whether I would consider it. And we've talked about it a lot, and the answer is no. It's just for a lot of reasons, it's not who I am, but she and I are now of a like mind that there are lots of ways we can contribute short of that.
You write a lot about your family in the book, the loss of a child, which is the indescribable, the worst loss any parent can experience. How has your family shaped you, all those experiences as a leader? What have you learned from that?
They've centered me, mocked me, given me absolutely wonderful and brutal feedback. They're a source of incredible laughter. And someone asked me walking through an airport the other day, basically, how could I be happy? And I said, I'm surrounded by people I love. I have this amazing family and friends. I'm the happiest, richest man in the world, given that. And so they bring me all that, and they help compartmentalize in a great way. I'd come home from work, and we work really hard not to make Dad the center of the family. Dad has issues, okay? We put those to the side, and then we talk about what everybody else is doing, and we laugh, and we cry, and it helps me refresh. But look, one of the reasons I'm worried about this is I don't want my children to be James Comey's daughter or son. They're amazingly talented kids. I want them to be them. And my family helps me with that by saying, yeah, Dad, you're great, okay, and moved on to the next thing.
How have they dealt with the President of the United States saying you should be in jail? How's your family dealt with that?
Different levels of reaction. Mine, which is something that concerned me a great deal, is a shrug. Like, oh, there he goes again. And then I catch myself, because I hope you're not shrugging, because that's me being numb to something that is not okay, that is not normal. And that Republicans, if they just close their eyes and imagine Barack Obama waking up in the morning saying someone should be in jail, they will understand that it's not normal. Now, my family has different levels of reaction.
But you're saying essentially the danger is it becomes normalized.
Yes, that we become numb to it. That is not okay. This is the United States of America. The President of the United States is saying that, forget me, saying that lots of private citizens shall be in jail, should be in jail, must be in jail. That is not okay, given our commitment to the rule of law. And again, I'm ashamed of Republicans for this. And that's why I urge them, close your eyes and imagine the next president, if it's a Democrat, doing that. What are you going to say? You'll be sitting in front of Anderson Cooper saying, it's outrageous, it's an attack on America. So why is it not today? It's bipartisan should be the outrage of that attack on our norms. So my reaction is a shrug. To my family, it's probably, especially to my wife, it's more painful to see and to watch me in the middle of all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, given that centering that my gang has had since the very beginning, it's fine.
You say the president's comments are an attack on America. Yes?
America, right. The reason I say that is America's core is really two things: truth and closely related, the rule of law.
I just want to point out how, not only just how extraordinary it is to hear the man who was the FBI director saying that the current president's words are an attack on America. I mean, that's not, I don't think that's happened.
You asked me 3 years ago, 10 years ago, would these words ever be coming out of my mouth? Of course not. But it's happening. The President of the United States is attacking the Justice Department, attacking the FBI, attacking the federal judiciary, and pronouncing that private citizens who have been accused of no crime should be in jail. Just pause for a second and reflect on that. No matter what your political orientation is, that's not normal. That is an attack on our core values. And it should stop, and everybody should call on it to stop.
Former Director James Comey, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Just slow mo. Sorry.